supposed to be a morale factor, but we were also trying to sound like a station back home to achieve that. And one of the things that stations back home always did was give weather forecasts. Now, in Vietnam, you didn't have to give weather forecasts. There was only two possibilities, hot, and during the monsoon season, hot and wet. That was it. But form was more important than function, so we put in a direct line to the weather station at Tan Son Nhut Air Base and started giving regular weather forecasts, and in less than a week we had to stop because Army intelligence, there's an oxymoron for you, oxymoron, but Army intelligence found out the Viet Cong were planning their operations by what we said on the air. For example, if we said it was going to be overcast and cloudy, they knew we couldn't bring in air cover that day. So there were some more subtle cases, but there was also what I came to think of as the bureaucratic factor. Now, in 1965, the Air Force lost what they euphemistically referred to as a nuclear device off the coast of Spain. I understand the Navy went in later, a few years later, with an unmanned sub and retrieved it. But that story could not be put on the air, and the only reason I could ever get for killing it was, well, it might be embarrassing to the Air Force.
Yeah, really?
Yeah. One example was when it was an event that showed up in the movie as the bombing at Jimmy Wa's restaurant. Yeah. Actually, it was a place called the Mekong Floating Restaurant, and as the name would imply, it was built on a boat that was moored in the Saigon River. There were tables and chairs on the deck and a nice breeze coming in off the river, and it was very pleasant. The food wasn't bad, so quite often we would go from the station down to the Mekong to have dinner. One night we had 4 of us there. We left the boat, but we're hanging out in the area when the Viet Cong hit it with a claymore mine. Now, if you think, this isn't totally accurate, but it gets the idea. If you think of a book standing on end, and it's open, and depending upon whether it's open wide or narrow, that's the kind of spray of shrapnel it sends out when it explodes. And that evening, the Viet Cong did a wide spray that raked the whole side of the boat, but then they also, about 3 minutes later, set off a very narrow charge aimed at the gangplank when everybody was trying so frantically to get ashore. That's the one that did the real damage. We heard the commotion and the sirens and went back to see what was going on. We then, it was obvious there wasn't too much we could do to be of help, so we gathered what information we could and went back to the station, wrote up the story. It was about 8 at night, and we called the duty officer at MACV and read him the story, and he said, "Oh no, we can't put that on the air." And I said, "Why not?" And he said, "Well, we don't have any official word that it happened." Well, I said, "Well, sir, I was there." And he said, "Yeah, but we don't know if anybody was seriously injured." I said, "Well, there was blood all over the place." He said, "Yeah, but we don't know if anybody was killed." I said, "Sir, with all due respect, with my own eyes, I have seen heads severed from bodies. Now, barring the second coming, they are not going to get up and walk away." And the final answer was no, and the final reason was, well, suppose we're wrong, whatever that meant. Yeah. Now, that man was a junior officer. He was there all by himself in the middle of the evening. He had to make a decision, and he had to make a decision right then and there. And if he knew that if he let me put it on the air and there was a problem, then it was his neck on the line, not mine. And in a situation like that, it doesn't take much of a genius to figure out that the safest course of action is, in the words of Nancy Reagan, just say no. And that's what they did, time after time.
Adrian just said something that I'd forgotten all about. When I was in COIC on Network Radio, we were running a defensive driving campaign. And the North Koreans got a hold of that and said that the Americans were on the defensive. And they they took this PSA I had done and they spliced it in such a way, and I wish I had it, that I was saying things I had never said, and we had to yank the whole campaign.